Hi, Diane. How are you today?
Hi, Omi. It's good to be here with you.
Well, same here. So, you are very famous for two things, I would say. One is, well, maybe more, but two things that refers in my words. So one is starting Summit Public Schools, which, it's probably the most innovative chain of schools that I know. Started in Silicon Valley, but I know now it's all over the United States. Any other country or just
No,
the US?
there's a couple of places who've been inspired, but
Uh,
yes.
Okay. And the second thing is your book. And you wrote a book that became super famous about education. And I understand why you decided to write the book, but here's a question for you. Why did you decide to write a book after being a teacher for so many years?
Yeah. I decided to write the book because, and I think this is why a lot of people write books. Like, I wanted to have a conversation with other people about education. And I felt like I couldn't talk to everyone who I wanted to talk to. And so I felt like if I could write a book, I could share with them some ideas and thoughts, and then maybe they would, be able to share back with me, which is what happened after writing the book.
And it's the first time you write a book, right?
It is, yes.
And
First book.
actually, in your second book, you actually wrote it on Books.
I
The
did.
Huskies. Yes, I know. I actually have it right here. But again, you never wrote a book, right? And I think in your case, it was like publishers even they came to you. Like people came to you and say, you need to write a book, right? So you
Yeah.
sit at home in front of your laptop. How do you start?
Well, I started by telling one story. So one of the people who was helping me to and wanted me to write the book said to me, I just want you to just sit down and write one story and pick a story that is challenging for you, but not painful. And then he's just write one story and share it with me and we'll talk about it. And so that's where I started with one little story, and then that grew into a whole book.
Okay, and because we are talking with young authors, that's exactly what they're about to do. And so you are in this moment, and I'll make it very technical for you. You're at this moment, and you need to write one short story.
Mhm.
Where do you get inspiration from? How do you start? Because the starting point is very difficult for many people.
It is. I think what I did is I just sat for a moment and I thought about my life, because we know our lives. I think it's helpful to write about things that you know. And sometimes people think, well, no one's going to want to read about what I know. It's not very interesting, but that's not true. Everyone leads really interesting lives. And so I think I sat and I thought about, well, what's in my life? What's a time or a moment that was confusing to me or curious to me, or I had wondering about that, or I don't know how to make sense of that time, or it was really fun, or and I think about a moment in my life and then I just start describing it. It's that simple. Where was I? What was the sky like that day? Who was there with me? And what can I tell you about those people who were there with me? What do they look like? What do they sound like? How do I feel about them? Just everything you can think of about what was going on. And I think that gets you flowing. And then you just tell the story.
So you told the story, which it was a real story, I assume, right?
Real
and
story.
you and you painted with every possible detail that you know. Did you know at the beginning when you start to write, like what's the end? I know you knew in reality what's the end, but did you know already how you're going to frame it, or not really?
I did not know that at all. And one of the interesting things I've learned about writing is that when I don't edit myself, when I just write everything that's in my head, because I think one thing we do with our pen or our computer is we become our own editor, and we think, oh, I think that, but I'm not going to write that. Or, oh, I can only write that sentence if it's a perfect sentence. And one of the things I learned, and a tip I had was I would set a timer for like 3 minutes. and I would say, I'm just going to write as many words as I can in 3 minutes about this story. And I would just not look at it. I would just write as many words. They could be spelled wrong. They could maybe not be a whole sentence. I would just write as much as I can for 3 minutes. And then I could go back and look at it and like clean it up and say, oh, that needs a capital, or, oh, I forgot this part. But when I would just let myself write for just little short periods and get it on the page, that's when the story started coming out.
I love it. I love this technique because it removes your shield. Like you just you just put everything there, and that's fascinating. And then you when you go back to it, you like delete a lot, or do you feel that that's pretty awesome because I just gave it from my heart?
Yeah. Well, one thing I learned is never to delete anything in writing. I created what was called a basement. And so, the basement's under your house. You don't usually go down there. You kind of keep stuff down there. It's there, but you don't use it very much. And so when I would go back in my writing and I would edit, if there was something I didn't want to use, I wouldn't delete it. I would just put it in the basement. And so on my computer, that was just, I made a line and I titled it basement. I just put it down in the basement. So it was always there if I wanted to go get it. Sometimes I did, but a lot of times I just left a lot of stuff in the basement. And then I just kept the really good stuff upstairs.
And by the way, Breebooks is perfect for it because you can just like keep adding many pages and just keep them there and move forward. And so you write this first story that that this is the advice that you got. You read it for the first time. Do you like it?
I did like it. I read it the first time and I thought, oh my, I forgot to say this part, or this part is interesting, but I don't know if you can tell. So I went back then and I added more to it, and I took a few things out and I rearranged it. But that felt easier once I had written it down on the page.
Okay, and then what do? Do you send it to somebody? Do you share?
I did.
Okay.
I shared it with people and had them read it. And then I would just listen to what they would say. And I would just be very curious about what did they get from my story, and how did they experience it, and what did they feel when they read it, or what did they think? And then I would think, oh, is that what I wanted them to think or feel? Or did they miss something that I thought I had said that they didn't get from it? And that would help me get more back into to do the next round on the story.
It's amazing that that's what you're saying, because one of the advices that we give young authors is to finish their first book and then to literally publish it, like sell it, give it to a few friends, and normally it's like close family. Read it to them, read it with them, get the feedback, and then go back to Breebooks and edit it and doing like a second version which is ready for the public. Because there is something when you get those first feedback, exactly, that you're like, oh, they missed the point, or they saw something that I didn't see, which is fascinating. So, but you have a big book to write, right? This is just your first day of training, right? You're like you have your first, let's call it the first story. What's next?
Well, then I wrote a lot of different stories. And so a big book is really just a whole bunch of little stories put together, right? And so I just started writing a lot of stories. And then I started thinking about, well, how do these go together, and do I want to say something about them? But really, they're kind of like Legos. Once you write a bunch of stories, you just can build different things with them, and you can put them in a different order, and you can snap some together, and you can. So I just created a lot of Legos that then I just started building the book with. Essentially, and you can think about that as stories. You can think about that as characters or people too. A Lego can be a person. It could be your mom or your friend or your dog, and you just get a bunch of those Lego pieces and then you put them together.
Yeah, but by the way, I don't think like our young authors know, but when Breebooks was just an idea, you are probably the second or third person that heard about the idea. And I remember you told me, oh, I used to teach creative writing for young kids, and everything you're describing, I've been doing the same thing. I just used pieces of cardboard to do
Exactly. Cards. And I would write on a deck of cards. I would make a deck of cards. I would pass them out to my students, and it would say, it would give like a little bit of a clue, like, your story has an animal in it. And so they would just pick an animal, and then your story has it takes place on an island, or, and this is when we were inventing creative stories. And so they would just get about 5 different cards, and then how do you put those Legos together into a story?
So your advice here is like this. I love this concept of Legos. Is like, we can take a character or a place
Mhm.
and develop it,
Yes.
and then we have this component. But I also think about coding. It's the same thing. We call it the library. You develop a library. You
Yes.
have your own very detailed or undetailed or mysterious or whatever thing. And then let's call it, just for example, call it a character. And then you have a place that also can be mysterious, etc. You're describing it. And then you're starting to play with those Legos, and sometimes you use them together. Sometimes you forget one and you bring them back.
Mhm.
And so those are the elements that you're doing. And now your book is it is, by the way, highly recommended. Not only by me, also by Bill Gates, just that you know. But you are trying to write something which is very serious, right?
Yeah.
Like, and when you try to write something very serious, it can be boring. It can be like very so. And your book, again, it's a very serious book. Like, so how do you make it interesting when you write about a subject that on one is very serious, etc. And there is interest clearly for that, but it can be tiring. So how do you balance yourself when you do that? This is the big picture, right?
Yeah. I, I think for me, the first thing was, when it's a topic that's serious, which I take very seriously, how do people learn, and how do they grow, and how do they develop, and how do schools do their job of helping people do that? And there's a lot of science in that, and a lot of information, like you said. For me, one of the most important things was to explain why this mattered. And so there just has to be a why. Why would anyone care about this, and why does it matter? And so that was always at the top of my mind. How do I help people understand why this technical information I'm sharing with them, why they should care about it, and why it matters? And then how do I bring it to life with real people who I can tell their story of how this has mattered to them, or what it's looked like, or when they didn't have such a thing, and how that was very tragic. And so it was the combination of the stories, and then making why from them. Why would anyone care? And then giving people like information. When they read books, they want to know what they can do about it. They don't want to just sit around. People are motivated. They want to make the world a better place. And so if you can help them understand why, and how this will really impact people's lives, I think they really do something with what you're sharing.
We have a bunch of young authors that are using writing a book to create some movement, and I have a couple of stories in my and that in fact that's what you are doing, right? You're trying to create a movement
Yes.
right, and so I know you, and I know your vision about education, and the way you approach it, which was very innovative and still very innovative to most of us. And you almost became like a prophet of, like, of somebody that's trying to say, you need to think this way. And but then your book was very personal. Like, I didn't feel that I'm reading. Why did you choose to do it like this? Why did you choose like the personal angles versus, like, like a Bible kind
Yeah.
of?
Um, Well, it's a very good question. It was not an easy decision because, it can be hard. I discovered that when I was in conversation with people, I could tell people about my story and, why I do what I do. And you're right, I'm trying to create a movement. And in my experience, people who are trying to create movements, it's very personal to them. They have a personal connection and it's meaningful to them. And it can be hard to share that because sometimes that personal connection comes out of pain or tragedy or difficulty, and sometimes we don't want to share that, or we feel nervous to share that. What will people think of us? How will people see us? And we try to put our very best self forward and only the good parts, and we don't want people to see maybe the parts that are more vulnerable. And I decided to make the book very personal because in my experience with students in schools, we all have a story and it's not the perfect story or the perfect life. And I thought, if I can't be honest and tell you where I came from and why I'm motivated to do this, then how can I expect that of you? How can I expect you to believe in and trust me? And so for me, it was very important that I was honest and transparent and vulnerable with anyone who would take the time, who would take their very precious time and money and give it to me. That's such a gift in reading my book. Every person who writes me and says, I read your book, I just thank them. And I say, thank you for reading my book. It's such a gift for me that you have done that. I'm so grateful to them for doing that. And I felt like I needed to give them something back.
So this feeling, I think as readers, we if we notice that the story is not authentic,
Yes.
we lose interest very fast. So and I think that's what you're pointing on. So we have about 10 minutes left. So I want to take you into two subjects, like about 5 minutes each. The first one is I want to take you back to the classroom and being a teacher.
Mm.
You're talking now for kids that are about to write their first book. What is like the best advices that you can give them that to do and not to do? For example, let's say I'm 9-year-old and I'm from I don't know, from Mumbai. What should I do? What should I not?
Well, I think there's two possible pathways here. I think one possible pathway is to just to write about what you know. So my book is what I know. It's like 25 years of learning and development, and it's what I know. And so I think a first place to start is just write what you know, what is around you. The other place you can go, because I think people have great imaginations, is what's in your imagination and what do you imagine and what do what do you want the world to be? And I think you can go both of those pathways, and I'm sure there's some mixture of them in between. But I think it's important to ask yourself, what do I feel more comfortable with, and what am I excited about and curious about? And so I would advise one of those two directions. And then I think that there are some basic things that stories need. They need characters in them, and so who are the people in your stories? And they need to be in a certain place and a certain time. So imagine what that place and time is, and I just make pictures in my head. So when I was writing my book, I have a movie of my book in my head, and I make this movie, and it's very colorful and real and rich, and I watch that movie in my head and then I write it. And so I would encourage them to make the movie in their head. And it's kind of fun too, because who knows, maybe their book will be made into a movie one day. It will already
Totally.
be
Yeah.
designed that way, right? And so yeah, make the movie in your head. And then it's so much easier to describe the movie you're seeing than to think that you're just making something out of words, I think. Because I think what we want for our readers is they can, by reading our words, picture our movie and watch our movie.
right? I love it, by the way. I use the same technique as well. I always visualize a scene, and it's much easier for me to describe it versus just, you know, writing it and then converting it. So it's I wonder if it's like the way different brains work. Now, the second question that I have for you is like, I remember when your book came out. Okay, I'll explain. You know, our authors, the first thing that they do is write a book, but then most of them are starting a little journey of trying to sell and to promote their books, right? And you know, and I've been talking to many kids about, like, you know, the best ways to do it, and it's very time consuming, and it's very different. It's almost like switching from the creative to sales, right? Now, I remember when you did it, you were so busy. Like, I remember, like, we probably stopped speaking for many months at the time because you were just like moving from a place to a place. And so I would love if you can share a little bit experience, what you learned from it, and if there is there anything relevant to young authors, because we do have young authors that sold, like, you know, 1,500 books in a month.
Amazing.
So they're pretty, they know what they're doing, but I wonder about the emotional journey that you had to go
Yes.
through, and anything a young authors can learn from it.
Yes. Okay, let me think of a couple of things. So the first thing is, I thought that if you just wrote a really good book, that people would buy it and read it. I was so silly. It's not true. I mean, there's probably millions of books in the world sitting on shelves that are very good books that no one has ever read, because you can't just write a good book. You have to actually sell a book. And so that's how it works. And so that's the first thing I had to learn and get over, is just writing a good book was not going to sell it. But it's true, if it's not a good book, then it probably won't, a lot of people won't read it. So it's important, but it's not everything. I think the second thing is, no one will read it if they don't know about it. And so what you have to start by doing is, how do you get as many people as possible to know about your book? And it's really from there a very sort of simple process. Mine got very complicated and maybe with some fancy people, but it's really the same process of, like, I made lists and lists and lists of every person I know, who are all the people that I know in the world, who I can tell them about my book. And then I wrote to them, or I called them, or I sent them, you know, something on, you know, social media, and I told them about my book, and I told them why it mattered to me and why I hoped that they would read it. And then I actually gave some books to people. So there were some key people who I thought, those people know a lot of people, and they actually will be able to tell a lot of people. And so I gave them a book, and I asked them if they would read it. And you've mentioned one of those people that I gave it to was Bill Gates, and he did read it and he did like it. And so then Bill Gates told people about the book. And when he does that, now suddenly millions of people know about the book. And what I did learn is that when people read a book and they like it, they talk about it. And so that's the key, is you need people to read it and like it, and then they start talking about it, and then give them places to talk about it. And so there's a lot of places now where you can give people reviews for their book and share about it. And you really have to encourage people to do that, I think, in places that others will see. So you have to ask people, will you write a review of my book? I know that you liked it and you told me you liked it, but will you tell other people about it and write a review? And so it just keeps asking people to talk about it and share it. And then whenever possible, I would share it with audiences. So I would have talks or meet with people, and I would share parts of it and we would talk about it. And so that's why I was so busy, because I was going all over the place doing that. But that really is anywhere and everywhere that I had an opportunity to talk with someone about it, I would. And it's the network effect. And what I love about this is, this not only applies to books, but this is such an important lesson in life. One of the most important things that help us be successful is creating a network of people that we communicate with and share with. And you and I know this because this is how we met each other.
Exactly.
And so I love that that buy books lets people do that, practice this most important skill in life, not just around their book, but for everything that they're going to do.
So and it will take it down to the level like, because most of our authors don't know Bill Gates, but if even if your aunt write a review on Facebook or
Yes.
whatever on about your book, you might think it's not relevant, but her friends or their friends will know it, and if enough people do that, you create a thing, and you create this buzz. And the second thing that I think that you just mentioned, which is so important, it does give you the skill to maneuver in our world.
Yes.
And be able to exchange ideas. This is something we do all the time. Exchange ideas, and your book is sometimes just a trigger for something that is much greater than like, again, I exchanged with you the ideas about Books. When Book was an AD, you gave me a feedback, do that on, and became a company that our students right now are reading. So we it's not we talk about it, we actually practice it every day.
Exactly.
So I know we need to wrap up. So I just want to say thank you. You're very inspiring, beyond writing books, and I'm sure our young authors will learn so much from our conversation. I'm very, very grateful for you.
Thank you. I am grateful for you.